Good afternoon and welcome. It's Tommytown Television, episode 3. Unlike the prior 2 weeks, we are actually recording this early. We're recording this late Wednesday evening because Brookline Interactive is going to cut from this directly to the school committee meeting they're having at 3 o'clock. And being short-staffed and working as hard as they are, the easiest way to do it was for us to pre-record. So it's Wednesday night, but we're going to try to pretend it's Thursday the best that we can. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Allana Taranto of Ars Magna Photography Studio. She is my wife's cousin. She is a COVID-19 former patient, I guess. She's out of the woods now, and we'll tell you about that in a few minutes. She's also my photographer. So if you've ever gotten a photo with my face on it and it looked good, you can blame Allana for that. Before we get into that though, I like to sort of go through some things that have happened in the last several days just to keep folks up to date the best we can. Governor Baker recently extended business closures to May 4th. That's 4 weeks beyond what had been initially outset. It's not a surprise. We expect the maximum number of cases, new cases in one day to occur right around April 15th. And so closure through May 4th should get us through the lion's share of the new cases, of the hospitalizations, and so forth. That's not just non-essential businesses, that's also daycare, that's also public schools. And as you can imagine, state agencies such as the RMV and the courts are closed. They don't all open exactly on May 4th, so you want to keep an eye on that. But I encourage you to not just show up to a state agency. Go ahead and call first and make sure that you even need to take care of that business. Many things have been extended for 60 days or more. I also want to mention, importantly, that income tax is no longer due April 15th. It's now due July 15th. No penalties, no interest. It's just due July 15th. And so you've got 3 more months. If you're stuck at home now and you've got the time, feel free to get them done and send them in. But you've got a little extra time. You may have heard within the last few days, the federal government passed into law the CARES Act, and it's a big bill. Some highlights. Checks are going to go out to folks who earn less than $99,000 a person. Check with your senator or your congressman for details, but that's the highlight. They have an increase in unemployment benefits, which is critical. We'll get this week's new unemployment data soon, and it is expected to be worse than last week, which set the record for the most number of new unemployment claims in a week ever. There are some bailouts of both small businesses and big businesses in the bill. There's money for cities, states, and transportation agencies, including the MBTA. There's talk of allowing restaurants with takeout and delivery to sell beer and wine. Both the House and the Senate have passed identical language, but other parts of the bill are still being worked out, and so it's not signed into law just yet. But when it is, what we are expecting is folks to be able to buy as many as 16 12-ounce cans of beer or 2 750 milliliter bottles of wine to go or for delivery from restaurants that, of course, have a liquor license. And finally, on local issues, 2 items I think that are very important. The first is that town elections have been pushed back to Tuesday, June 9th. They will not be in May this year. They will be Tuesday, June 9th. There will be 2 ways you can vote. You can vote in person, not recommended, perfectly legal if that's the way you need to do it. Do your best to keep your social distance. The other thing you can do is a mail-in ballot. Secretary of State Bill Galvin has made it very clear that every single person is eligible for a medical excuse for a mail-in ballot for the spring elections because of social distancing. And so you can request the absentee ballot, you can fill out the form and mail it in, you can even email all the information and include an image of your signature, either your iPhone photograph or your Android photograph, or scanning it in. So you can get that ballot. And the other part of that is town meeting. First night is now Tuesday, June 23rd. Moderator Gadsby has the ad authority, and he exercised it, recognizing that we want to have town meeting start after the town election so that the new town meeting members, certainly one or more new select board members and so forth, can be participating as town meeting members. So that's the sort of the government highlights, all the news that's fit to print. But now we're into the exciting part of the show with Allana. Allana is a cousin. We've known each other for quite a long time, and she lives in Boston and works as a photographer. And she got sick. She got coronavirus. So Allana, why don't you tell us just a little bit about sort of timeline, when you thought you might have it, how you went about finding out, and what that test was like.
Sure. Thanks for having me as part of this today, Tommy. And so I, as Tom said, I'm a photographer in Boston. A friend to help her photograph an event, and it was just like any other event that I've ever photographed. I thought nothing of it. About 5 days later, I felt a little weird. I knew that I was aware from the news about coronavirus, but the symptoms I was having felt pretty similar to any other flu or virus that might be coming through our house. We have a 3-year-old in preschool, so it didn't feel any worse than anything that we had already kind of gone through and recovered this season. But it did feel a little bit different. And so I was aware that I had probably something. And I remember the few gigs that I had that I still felt capable of doing, I made an effort, to kind of like bump elbows instead of shake hands. And I was washing my hands a little bit more than usual. And then my exposure was on a Thursday. Maybe the following Tuesday, Wednesday, I felt a little weird. And that pretty much cleared up. And then on the following Thursday, so a week after my exposure, the woman that I worked with texted me Thursday night, and she said, I think we might have been exposed to corona at this thing. And we kind of chatted a little bit about it. And then in the morning, I talked to my partner, James, and he was like, well, we should probably just go get tested just to make sure. So not really fully thinking through anything, because I was certain that whatever weird thing I had experienced was just a regular run-of-the-mill preschool winter virus. I didn't have any of the symptoms that the CDC was listing as being indicators of COVID-19. So I dropped my son off at school, and I just stopped in a couple blocks over to my healthcare provider and just walked in and was like, hey, I think I was exposed. I'm asymptomatic mostly. Should I do anything about it? And their response really freaked me out. Everybody kind of backed away from me. They immediately gave me a mask. Somebody quickly came out and escorted me into a separate wing. There was nobody else there. I could hear them on the phone. They were talking to DPH and to Boston Public Health Commission. What did they do with me? So I think I was the first person with potential exposure to show up that morning after this had been announced that there were cases in Boston. And they kind of took my vitals. They said DPH isn't, you don't qualify to get tested, but the nurse was very kind. And she said, keep that mask on. I'm going to walk you out the back door. I don't want you to talk to anybody or stop anywhere. I want you to go directly home, which kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I had somebody else pick up my son from school. We thought about it well, I don't have any symptoms, but just to be safe, I'll stay home this weekend. But my partner, you know, he was feeling fine. My son was feeling fine. They kind of did their regular weekend things. And in retrospect now, of course, we wouldn't have had them do that. But it was, you know, 3 weeks ago now when the world was a very different place.
Sure.
And I think we did not feel as vulnerable. Just in the city, we just didn't feel as vulnerable. So I stayed home. I sort of quarantined from March 6th. And then on Sunday, March 8th, I got a phone call from DPH, and they said, "We are set up to start testing. We'd like you to come in. Can you get here in half an hour?" So they sent me this like encrypted email, which gave very explicit instructions on how to arrive at MGH for testing and what to do. And I can go over that process if you want.
I'm curious about the test itself. It looked like a Q-tip on the end of a hockey stick, this incredibly long Q-tip that they
I
managed
would
to poke
say
your brain
that,
with. Is that a
yeah.
reasonable
So
explanation?
the experience of being tested. So they tested. So again, I was in the very early phase of testing for this. So my partner and son ended up getting tested. So I had a nasal and throat swab, and I think now they're just doing nasal swabs. But yeah, it looks like a cross between a Q-tip and a pipe cleaner, and everybody around you test full on shield, scrubs, everything is covered. And it very much feels, that part was really scary. I think that was when I realized just how intense and how real it was to go in for testing like that. They had converted a parking lot, and outside, kind of at the back of MGH, I had to go around a certain way. Um, they had converted a parking lot, and there were chairs taped out every 6 feet in a grid. And at the time, I was the only person in there. And and so they called you back. They called me back, and they took my vitals again. They kind of, I think I was really the first person that this doctor had seen. He sort of was talking through the whole process with me. And then they sent me to another room to get the swabs. So it's uncomfortable. I mean, it's not nothing, but it doesn't last very long. So yes, it is like a tiny, looks like a hockey stick, like you said. And it has like a bristle at the end of it, similar to a pipe cleaner, or what they use for pap smears. So they stick it up your nose and you're like, no, that's not so bad. This is kind of weird. And then they keep going and you think, wow, I didn't know my nasal cavity was that big. And then they keep going some more, and then they're kind of,
So small for a hockey stick, but big for a hockey stick going up your nose.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it kind of irritates your sinuses, but it didn't. The actual thing, it made my eyes water. The actual time it takes to do it is very quick. And so, like any sample that you get, like if blood or urine or whatever you get at the doctor, if they come over, they read your name, you confirm who you are, they take the sample and they take it away and you're done. So the test itself is very fast, but the kind of impending terror of being in that big, kind of scary testing facility, that really shifted my thinking. And so from there, we just had to wait until the test results came in.
So you went home and you were definitely quarantining at that point, right? You were
Yeah,
not.
so at that point, I was in isolation.
And for how long did you wait? This was early in the process. Testing has gotten much more plentiful and faster. But at that point, very early in this pandemic, at least within Massachusetts, how long did you wait between when the hockey stick went and tickled your brain to when they called you with the results?
Yes. So they told me that it would take 24 to 48 hours. And then they said, or maybe longer, which that seems like a very long time when you're extraordinarily anxious. So I was tested Sunday morning. Tuesday morning, I started calling MGH. The nurses there continue to be phenomenal. Every time I have a question, they are I'm usually the first person to ask it, being on the front line of this. I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the majority of people in terms of like my timeline. So somebody called me. I kept calling all day on Tuesday. And somebody called me back. And I'm not sure now if it was from the Department of Public Health nurse or if it was actually somebody from MGH. They were able to see that my test results came in on Tuesday, but they weren't able to tell me what they said. They weren't able to even see what they said. So I'm a little unclear. I think I was in that first round of tests that might have gotten to the state lab.
So then did you find out the results the next day? Not that
So
long?
I found out like 2 days later.
I see. And they told you over the phone, and I'm sure you had a bunch of questions. What do I do? What don't I do? But I know that part of that is, it's I imagine it's the horror stories you hear about. If you test positive for an STD, you got to call all the people you were with and tell them.
That was something, the big sort of the big emotional part of this was thinking retroactively from when I found out to when I was from exposure to when I found out was a full week of me. It was my birthday. We were out to dinner. My son was at school. He went to a birthday party. He went to music class. Like, I was interacting with people all week. He was interacting with people. My partner, James, was interacting with people all week. Totally unknowing, right? So we had to go back and contact all of those people. And they had questions for us that we couldn't answer. And they were seeking guidance from us on what to do. Should they pull their kids out of school? Do they need to disclose this to their workplace? Should they self-quarantine? They were questioning, what day did I stop by and drop this package off for you? Well, when we had lunch last week, did you feel symptoms? Were you coughing? These are questions that I wasn't able to answer. And I don't think, like, pre this pandemic being forefront to mind, you don't think about how many times you coughed or touched your face in 2-hour window 7 days ago.
And certainly, I guess there's 3 categories of people. There are the people who and you spend time with. There are the people who maybe you don't know but are knowable, like the parents of the other kids at the birthday party for your son or something like that. And then there's the person who you passed or even, God forbid, sneezed near at Trader Joe's, who you'll never see again.
Yeah, so it was all of those, the people. Okay, so music class is an example. So we had to call the teacher and they had to alert all the people in the music class. But the music class is also held at a yoga studio. And that anybody who had gone into that yoga studio, potentially, because everything is still unclear about how it spread and how long it lasts on the surface. And we were there for 45 minutes. I don't know much of a viral load I was shedding, if any, at that point. But you think about all the other people that might have gone in a span of a week to this space, and where those people might have gone. So it really was eye-opening about how connected we all are, especially in a city where we're popping here and there, and your kids are in this. For example, another example, we have another kid in the building. We had a play date. He's at another school, so that school also, it was a big job to manage contacting those people and then also like receiving their panic.
And
I
so,
mean,
so you worked through that. I imagine that probably took a few days as you remembered people who you had forgotten the first time through. And during that time, um, are you feeling symptoms at all? And what are the symptoms you're feeling as someone
it's
who is COVID
yeah,
positive?
I have a really hard time knowing what was this and what was other stuff. So I had a respiratory infection earlier in February with a very productive, gnarly cough. And that sort of went away and petered out to a dry cough. So a dry cough is one of the COVID symptoms. So that I sort of had for like maybe a week, but I didn't, it would, I don't know if that was left over from the other respiratory infection or was part of this. Um, we were taking our temperature every day. DPH had us do that to monitor our own symptoms from home and keep records of everything. And then um, on maybe a week after I found out that I had tested positive, our son spiked a fever for about 12 hours. And maybe no, it wasn't a week. It was the day, it was right before I found out I was positive. Um, the timeline is getting very mushy. I'm sorry. So he spiked a fever, and that was the only symptom that he exhibited. And it was about 12 hours. We treated it with children's Tylenol. It was gone. But that triggered him getting tested. And so both he and my partner got tested. By the time they got their tests approved and sorted out, it was 2 weeks post exposure. They both tested negative. It's I don't know anything about infectious diseases, and I just find it very strange that we could have been living in a house for a week together without them
And when you say house, you
getting
don't mean a
anything.
spacious Victorian. I've been to where you
No,
live.
I mean, we live in an artist loft, so it's our son has a bedroom, but he's a 3-year-old, and so it's just basically one big room. So isolating in that situation became tricky. So we just set up a second bed. So the adults, he has his own bed, our son, and then the adults slept separately. My partner has a lab background, so he was really on it. Like everything in the bathroom was separated. Our toothbrushes were in isolation from each other. Everybody had color coded towels. Um, which I know you're a parent is hard, right? It's it's hard to keep your kids' hands off of things. And I wasn't allowed in the kitchen. I wore a mask for the 2 weeks that I was in isolation at home. And I had one small area in that I was allowed to eat in, but I wasn't allowed to touch any dishes I it seemed kind of extreme, but I was so glad that they both tested negative.
Yeah, it worked, and that's great. So it's been quite a long time since you tested positive. How many days has it been since you
So
took?
I tested my tested positive. I mean, the test was on March 6th. I got the results on the 8th. And then I was released from isolation on the 24th.
Now, have you had a second test to demonstrate that you are now negative?
So I had called about that today. So now that I know that they are looking for plasma donations from people that had had COVID-19, one of the things that the Red Cross is looking for is a negative so that you can donate. And I called Mass General today and they were able to get me in for a second test. I'm not sure what magic words transpired there because I know I didn't call with the intention of getting a second test. I was calling to find out where my test results were, but they did get me in for a second test, which presumably is going to be negative so that I can do the plasma donations.
Well, I'm I hope it will be negative, and I'm delighted that you're looking to do the plasma donations. It's not just COVID-19 positive plasma donations Red Cross is looking for. Red Cross is looking for all donations right
Yeah.
now. And it's really important if you are eligible to give blood. Not everyone is, but if you are, and that's something you are willing to do, I encourage you to go to the Red Cross website and click away from there, and figure out if and how you can donate blood. It's one of the few things that it just might be worth leaving the house for. And I want to just take a minute to talk about that. The peak is planned to be is expected to be around April 15th, and by that I mean the largest number of new cases of positive tests is expected to be right around April 15th, and that's right around when we're expecting the biggest strain on medical resources, right? And this is after the doctors and nurses have been working on this for a month now, and some of them are starting to get sick. And so at the very same time when you're starting to lose people on that front line to their own isolation, that's when the number of folks showing up is going to be the highest, which is why it's really, really important over the next day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, more than any other time, really, really staying home all 24 hours of the day, not 23 hours and then go to the grocery store because, you need a few things and you just really need to get out of the house. This next 2, 3, 5 days is, in many ways, the most important time to not get sick. And the way you do not get sick is you do not leave your house and interact with people outside of your house at all if you can possibly avoid it, with that exception of giving blood if you can do it. On every show I do it, I don't want to forget to do it. So I want to remind folks, this is how you can find me anytime. 617-872-8921 is my cell phone. I know how to turn the ringer off. And so if you feel like it's a good time to call, go ahead and call. I promise you, for the 6 hours of sleep I won't answer. Tommy.vitolo, Vitolo, at mahouse.gov is my email address. Email me about anything. Obviously, if it is related to a privacy concern, use discretion. You're welcome to call me first and talk about the best way to go forward. But we've been helping folks. My office, working remotely, has been helping folks with COVID-19 related concerns directly, as well as issues related to housing and unemployment, taxes. We've been working with small businesses. We're really working hard to get folks the services that they need, that they're entitled to. And every day is a new day for us. We're learning as we go. But if there's something that I can do for you, please don't hesitate. Allana, we've got 1 or 2 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to sort of share about your experience, or any words of wisdom, anything we missed?
I do want to say that I feel really grateful that we had such wonderful neighbors, and being in isolation and in quarantine in an apartment building was very different. I agree with Tom. Please stay in your houses. Please quarantine and isolate as much as you can. But we did come up with some good solutions to help the people that people helped us, and we now in turn, having recovered, are able to help those people do things like walk the dog or pick up mail, and help with things so that people who, when they are sick, they can stay safely home.
Well, Allana, thank you for coming on the show, for sharing your story, for being honest, even in parts that may have been a little bit uncomfortable. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around this, and folks don't necessarily know how serious to take this all the time. It's real. I'm sure it was just absolutely terrifying for a while, and then after that, just remarkably inconvenient for weeks at a time. And I'm delighted that you and your family are healthy, and that we will see you again this Christmas Eve for dinner, as we do every year. And I just want to, again, thank Brookline Interactive Group, Big, who is the provider of not just local television services for shows like this, but also covering all of the public meetings which people can no longer attend. And so they're providing this really important service. So thank you, Brookline Interactive Group. Thank you, Town of Brookline, for working through this. And thank you, viewers. Please, again, we'll put it one more time on the screen there. Feel free to call, feel free to email if there's anything that my office can do for you. And coming up right after this is school committee meeting at 3 o'clock. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great afternoon.